All engine running.
Absolute genius.
Get this.
Welcome.
This is the show where we bring you
Science.
What that essentially means is
discoveries,
Advances.
Questions. Research.
technology.
Unbelievable.
Without further ado,
This is The Naked Scientists. Hello, welcome to The Naked Scientists podcast, the show that brings you the biggest breakthroughs and talks to the major movers and shakers in the worlds of science, technology and medicine with me, Chris Smith. And coming up this week, how an implantable defibrillator saved the life of Danish footballer Christian Eriksen, Russian cosmonauts fix an air leak aboard the International Space Station, what did that involve, and the dinner dilemma of Richard Feynman and his friend resolved by a maths equation. The 2026 FIFA World Cup is getting underway in Mexico, Canada and the US, and for many, it's a religion. Indeed, the revered Liverpool manager Bill Shankly famously said, "Some people believe football is a matter of life and death. I'm very disappointed in that attitude. I can assure you it is much, much more important than that." Denmark's talisman, Christian Eriksen, would no doubt disagree with Shankly. In the course of his glittering career, he's collapsed on the pitch twice now. Eriksen's heart reportedly stopped for 5 minutes in a European Championship match between Denmark and Finland back in 2021. Thankfully, he was resuscitated and then had an implantable cardioverter defibrillator fitted to keep tabs on his heart and to step in to restart it should anything go awry again. Well, that did happen just recently during a friendly the other day against Ukraine when another collapse saw the device restart his heart and he was thankfully able to walk off the pitch shortly afterwards. Now, all this got me wondering what these amazing life-saving devices look like and how they actually work. So I asked my colleague Stephen Pettit, who's a consultant cardiologist at the Royal Papworth Hospital, to pop by with one for me to look at.
So this is an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, or ICD as we call it. And this is a device that we use in patients who are at risk of life-threatening arrhythmias, heart rhythm disturbances, to automatically detect and treat those.
It is palm-sized, so it's pretty small.
Yeah, an ICD will fit in the palm of your hand. The sizes of these devices have come down over the years. When they were first developed 30 or 40 years ago, they were actually the size of a house brick and were implanted in the abdomen because that was the only place there was enough space for them. But as you say now, they fit in the palm of your hand and they're implanted in a manner almost identical to a pacemaker.
Where does it go?
So the device sits just above the left chest wall, underneath the collarbone, around about a centimetre below the skin. It is attached to an electrode, essentially like a floppy piece of spaghetti, and we feed that electrode through the venous system into the heart. And within the heart, it sits watching the heart rhythm.
Which bit of the heart's it in then?
All defibrillators that are put in through the venous system have an electrode in the right ventricle. Some of those defibrillators have leads within other places of the heart to help them sense and detect different types of heart rhythm disturbance or to help with them pacing the heart.
And the lead, is that listening to the heart, but also the way it can talk back to the heart?
The leads do two things. They sense and they pace. And it's looking at electrical signals within the heart. And then at any stage, if it sees a troublesome electrical signal, it can respond to that either by pacing or in the context of a life-threatening rhythm disturbance by charging and delivering an electric shock.
When you say pacing, is that it sending impulses down the connection then, which the heart picks up and responds to?
Correct. Defibrillators and pacemakers, the vast majority of them work on a demand principle where if the heart has its own electrical activity, it will just sit back and watch. But if there is a gap, it will fill that gap in. It will deliver an electrical impulse to the heart and stimulate a heartbeat.
How does it know when the rhythm's wrong then?
That's where defibrillators get very clever. So we program them to recognize very, very fast heart rhythms as abnormal. So if you and I were to go for a bike ride or a run, we could probably get our heart rate up to 170 or 180, maybe even 190 beats a minute. But we would not get it up to 260, 270 beats a minute. Those that are just too fast to be a normal heart rhythm. And it's those rhythms that they treat with electric shocks.
Why would someone get a heart rhythm like that?
It's a very, very good question, and one that fundamentally we don't know the answer to. People with certain types of heart condition are vulnerable to heart rhythm disturbances. Probably the most common risk factor for these sorts of heart rhythm disturbance is a person who's had a heart attack, a myocardial infarction in the past. But there are lots of other forms of heart muscle disease, inherited forms of heart muscle disease that can lead people to be vulnerable to heart rhythm disturbances. But why that heart rhythm disturbance happens on a particular minute of a particular hour of a particular day, we have no idea. And that's really why defibrillators exist. I mean, if we knew that someone was going to have a heart rhythm disturbance next week, well, we'd bring them into hospital before it happened so that we could treat them immediately. But we don't. The risk is there all the time as people go about their normal lives. And so that's why defibrillators are implanted, to provide that constant backup.
Is it anything to do with extreme exercise? Because this does seem to happen to a number of footballers. And is it anything to do with the fact they're putting huge demands on their body? Or is it just that they are the most monitored athletes in the world, so when it happens to them we notice?
I think probably the latter. If a footballer has a cardiac arrest on a football pitch, then that's news all around the world. But if a gentleman has a cardiac arrest on the high street whilst he's doing his shopping, then that tends not to make the news at 10. If you look at reports from the London Marathon, every year there will be some poor runner develops problems and ends up needing to be resuscitated.
Now, when this device detects a dodgy rhythm and resets the heart rhythm by delivering a shock, is it effectively doing then what you see in all the movies when people put an external defibrillator, they put the pads and the paddles on the chest and the person jumps off the bed? Is it effectively doing that but from the inside?
Yes, it's exactly what it's doing. So it's delivering a high voltage shock, but because the electrical impulse is being delivered right inside the heart, the energy levels that are required are less than with external defibrillation, where the electrical current has to pass through all of the chest wall to get to where it's needed.
How does that work then? Why would giving the heart an electric shock stop that rhythm?
Again, a very, very good question. I tend to think of this a little bit like fire breaks in a forest. When you have a heart rhythm disturbance like ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation, you've got very chaotic electrical activity within the heart, and the normal heartbeat doesn't get a look in. The aim of defibrillation is really to reset electrical activity in every single bit of the heart, and there will be then a pause, and then the normal heartbeat has an opportunity to come back.
The device you've got in your hand doesn't have any wires that would come out through the body, so has it got its own power source? It's completely self-contained?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a battery within the defibrillator, and the average life expectancy of one of these devices is probably somewhere between 6 and 8 years. And essentially it's got almost like a fuel gauge in a car. We see when it's getting down towards empty, and then when the red light comes on, patients are invited back into hospital to have their battery changed.
How much does it cost?
This device in the palm of my hand costs in the region of £10,000 to £15,000. So they are not cheap, but they are very, very effective ways of reducing the risk of sudden death for those of us who are vulnerable to sudden death by virtue of having a serious heart condition.
And the reassurance of knowing you're in good hands, though, priceless. Thanks very much to Stephen Pettit at the Royal Papworth Hospital. Birds use a variety of strategies to navigate. Now, they have excellent vision, so that usually takes precedence. But when visual cues are not available, such as during overcast, nocturnal, or in unfamiliar surroundings, they can instead rely on the Earth's magnetic field, using some kind of inbuilt compass. But we don't know how they do it. Now, though, intriguingly, researchers in Germany have identified that a type of big iron-containing white blood cell called a superparamagnetic macrophage, which is found in the liver, seems to hold the key. They found that if they deplete this population of macrophages, pigeons lose their ability to sense the Earth's magnetic field. Christian Kurtz is at the University of Bonn, and Martin Wikelski is at the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior.
Well, we know that animals can follow a magnetic direction. But how they do that, for example, songbirds that migrate from Europe into Africa every year in the billions, how they do that, we didn't really know.
How do we know it's magnetic, Martin?
Well, at night, in complete darkness, or when the sun is not out, when it's completely occulted, then they have to use a direction sense because they follow a line for hundreds of kilometers. And we also manipulated that sense before, so we know they have a magnetic direction sense.
So if you put birds in an artificially influenced magnetic field, they'll go the wrong way.
Yes, you can do that, exactly.
So in this present study, what were you going after to try to work out what might be the origin of this magnetic sensitivity, Martin?
Well, it was a total chance event. We were not searching for something. We were just getting together. And then Christian said, "Hey, I have these cells in the body that are magnetic." And I said, "Well, that's really crazy. Shouldn't we join up and, look at how that may affect magnetic sensing in animals?" And that's how it came about. And then, we went on this voyage together and everything was falling into place. It was crazy. It's a crazy idea. And then it seemed to really be true.
Magnetic cells, Christian. I'm intrigued.
So were we. I mean, we kind of stumbled over them during a technical study and we published them more than 10 years ago just to make people aware that they exist and that people have to be aware of them if they perform experiments, that they don't draw misconclusions. So when Martin and I by chance met on a meeting, he was mentioning that nobody has found cells that can respond to magnetic signals in the body. And I told him, well, we just stumbled over them. And then we had this eureka moment. Let's go after them and test whether they play a role in animal migration.
What are the cells, and how do you know they're magnetically sensitive?
These cells are immune cells. They are called macrophages. Macrophages exist in all tissues of our body. They are like the vacuum cleaners. They remove debris or material that should not be there to avoid inflammation. And these particular macrophages occur only in the spleen of mammals or in the liver of birds. And one of their jobs is to degrade old red blood cells. Red blood cells supply the body with oxygen, and the molecule that does that is called hemoglobin. And hemoglobin contains iron. And so when you degrade these hemoglobin containing cells, the macrophages make little storage compartments where the iron is put. And at some point it gets released to the bone marrow to make new red blood cells. But before this happens, the macrophages, they have little iron magnets within them. And with them, they can respond to external magnetic fields.
How do you know that they respond? What actually happens if you magnetize the cell? What does it do?
That's really exciting because regularly, these birds, like homing pigeons, they can be trained to fly in a certain direction, let's say east. But when you have complete cloudy days, like no sun coming through, really, really low clouds, they still find their way home. And that's when they use the magnetic direction sense. But Christian had this idea, well, we can knock out these macrophages, these cells that have the iron inside, the sort of the little magnets inside. So we did that. And when we released the same pigeons without these macrophages, without these cells, then they were completely lost. As if you are in the woods and you have no compass and you want to get out and you are getting lost. You still try to wander out, but you go in all kind of directions. That's what we found, and that is super exciting because it did show that these cells, these iron-containing cells, are responsible for the magnetic direction finding.
Christian, where did you knock them out from? Do they migrate from the spleen or the liver and go to other tissues, such as the brain, where they could pass signals or respond and pass signals into the nervous system? Or is this originating from the liver and the spleen?
Well, as far as we can say, they are residential. They stay in the organ where they perform their job. They don't go to the brain. At least we haven't found it. We have checked most tissues of the pigeons and we found them only in the liver. So they seem to be residential.
So, Martin, how do you think this is working then? Because, there are nerves that run through the liver and the spleen. Are they talking to the nervous system, or is there some other mechanism by which something in the liver and the spleen, which are two abdominal organs, can affect behaviour?
That's, I think, the super exciting part. We have our cell biologist, Clivia Lisowski, who actually investigated that primarily. And she showed that these cells sit next to the vagus nerve endings. So there's the nerve in the liver, and that doesn't go directly into your conscious brain, but it goes via the your backbone into the brain. So it's sort of this gut feeling that when a bird moves through a magnetic field, through an external magnetic field, the Earth magnetic field, then we think these iron particles in the cells are sort of bumping against the cell walls and make a signal there. And then the cells pinch the nerve, and that's how the information goes then into the brain via the backbone. So this is super exciting. So we think that, from the outside, external information is entering these cells in the body, and they transmit it unconsciously to your brain. So that's, we think, really a confirmation of gut feeling.
Both metaphorically and physically. Can you actually see the cells doing this, or can you measure anything, Christian, in the cells that shows you they are responding in this way and that they are passing information to those vagus nerve endings?
In principle, this is possible, and we are planning to do that for the future studies. So how exactly the cell biological alterations resulting from sensing magnetic fields, how they translate into nerve activation, this is a big question, and that requires a dedicated study on its own.
I will use the term gut instinct much more cautiously in future. That's an amazing story, though, isn't it? Christian Kurtz and Martin Wikelski there. They just published those findings in the journal Science.
The Naked Scientists podcast is produced in association with Spitfire, cost-effective voice, internet and IP engineering services for UK businesses. Find out how Spitfire can empower your company at spitfire.co.uk.
Music in the programme is sponsored by Epidemic Sound, perfect music for audio and video productions.
This is the Naked Scientists podcast with me, Chris Smith, and still to come, how maths can help us to resolve a dinner dilemma. But first, astronauts have now returned to the International Space Station after repair work was carried out on persistent leaks in the Russian part of the satellite. 5 of the space station's crew members were ordered to shelter in SpaceX's shuttlecraft and to brace for potential evacuation. Meanwhile, the 2 Russian cosmonauts who remained on board attempted to plug the leaks. Rachel Ralph caught up with Richard Hollingham from the Space Boffins podcast to bring us up to speed.
There was a lot of drama when suddenly we got this message from NASA saying they've evacuated 5 astronauts into the SpaceX capsule, sealed them in, and you had 2 Russian cosmonauts fixing this leak. So, this sort of came out of nowhere, but actually it really didn't come out of nowhere, because this particular module is called the PRK, which connects to the Zvezda service module on the International Space Station, has actually been leaking since 2019. So it was really unexpected that they suddenly decided to fix the leak now, and it looks like they've at least partially fixed the leak on the space station. They've used something, I love this, it's actually a patented sealant called Germatol 1, which is essentially some sort of sealant and cloth that they use to put over any potential holes in the spacecraft. At the moment, everything seems to be stable.
So like you said, these air leaks started in 2019. So what's actually prompted this heightened concern and caused the evacuation of the astronauts?
I don't think we're entirely clear, other than the Russians decided to fix it now, because the leaks don't seem to have been getting any worse, or at least as far as we know. But this is old, this spacecraft now. So this was designed in the 1980s. It was going to be the successor to Mir. It was built in the 1990s. It's been in space for almost 26 years. So it was launched in July 2000. And, it's a really harsh environment there. There's all sorts of particles. There could also have been errors. It's being docked with constantly. This is a tunnel leading to a docking port. So it's under all sorts of strains. And, the bottom line is it's getting old, it's getting worn, and how much longer it's going to last is the big question.
I presume that this emergency evacuation kind of demonstrates how seriously the air leaks were taken, but what would have happened to the other two crew members who stayed on board to fix the leaks if they needed to be evacuated as well?
It's important to understand that these are leaks, these are tiny leaks. It's a small amount of air leaking out. So it's not catastrophic. It's nothing like, the film Gravity, where suddenly the spacecraft's bombarded by all sorts of stuff and there are holes everywhere. It's really nothing like this. So this was a contingency, and I think it shows the care and the attention that the space agencies put into the welfare of the crew. I mean, it was really an abundance of caution here. And if something had gone really badly wrong, well, everyone can get quickly to a spacecraft. And the point of putting the astronauts in the spacecraft was they could undock from the space station if there was a major problem and just get out of the way. Those two crew that were fixing the leak, yes, they were probably under more peril, not really, because, it's unlikely that it would suddenly rupture. So they were probably at risk the most. But if it had got worse, they could just get out, shut the door and get into their Soyuz capsule and get off the space station. So, it's really an abundance of caution. And I think it shows that astronaut welfare absolutely comes first here.
So, like you said, astronaut welfare does come first, and these astronauts live in a perilous environment. So why haven't the leaks been properly repaired before, I guess? They've been partially repaired, like you said, especially now, but why not fully?
It is absolutely a perilous environment. 400 kilometres above the Earth, going at 27,000 kilometres an hour in the vacuum of space, and it's low Earth orbit, so there's lots of other debris sort of spinning around there, and it's an old space station. I mean, I wouldn't want to do it. The leaks themselves, we're probably going to see more. They're, sort of hairline fractures. I think the bigger concern would be if a large piece of space debris hit the space station or one of these really started to rupture. I mean, they could seal this area off. Think of it like a submarine where you have hatches between the various sections, or ships as well have that. So, they can seal off sections of the space station if there is a bit more of a problem. I think we are going to see more and more of these leaks over the next few years. At the moment, the plan is to take the space station out of orbit, push it out of orbit in 2030, maybe 2032. But it's a question of kind of keeping it going in the next 4 or 5 years.
So with the plans to decommission the ISS in 2030 or 2032, are there plans to potentially have a replacement space station at all?
There is no space agency plan to have a replacement space station, but there are plenty of private companies, and that's kind of the point. So NASA, who is leading on all this, wants to sort of make way for small private operators of space stations. And there are several being built by several companies. Whether they'll all fly, it's unclear at the moment, but that is the plan. So we'll see the end of the International Space Station. So this great international endeavor where you've still got, American astronauts working alongside Russians despite the war in Ukraine. And so that's going to be replaced with, I think, small private space stations, maybe more robotic craft. And then NASA is pushing forward and putting all its efforts into getting astronauts back on the moon.
Richard Hollingham speaking to our own Rachel Ralph. Many years ago, the Nobel Prize-winning theoretical physicist Richard Feynman went for dinner with his good friend Ralph Layton. They dined at this restaurant many times before, and so Layton wondered whether he should opt for his traditional favourite dish or be bold and choose something new, given there was, of course, a chance that it might not be as good as the one he knew he liked. Now, this is a classic maths conundrum, which is known as an optimal stopping problem. We run into them all the time. But it prompted Feynman to scribble down a mathematical solution there and then at the dinner table. Luckily, Layton kept the handwritten notes, but he struggled in the aftermath to make sense of Feynman's cursive writing. Now, though, 50 years on, a team of researchers have found a copy of those scribbled workings, and they've decoded Feynman's extremely elegant solution to the dinner problem. Richard Webber is an emeritus professor of maths and also a fellow of Queen's College at the University of Cambridge, and has literally written the book on these very problems, so he's the perfect person to take us through it.
It's a story 50 years old. Sometime in the 1970s, Richard Feynman was sitting at lunch at a Thai restaurant in Glendale, California, with his friend Ralph Layton, and they were trying to decide what to have for lunch. And Layton was wondering whether he should have his favorite dish, which was ginger chicken, or whether he should try something new in hope of finding a dish that was even better than ginger chicken. Feynman immediately saw this as a mathematics problem. He began writing down on a napkin what he thought the solution would be. The solution he came up with was a very beautiful one. He said that what you want to do, you want to try and maximize your total satisfaction. And so at each day, you should look at the number of days left that you might be going to this restaurant. You compute a threshold. The threshold has an interesting square root form. It's the square root of the days left divided by the square root of the days left plus 1. And this is a threshold when the number of days left is huge, is close to 1. But when the number of days left has reduced to just 1 day, then the threshold is equal to half. And so the idea is that at the very beginning, when there are many days left, the threshold is high. A meal has to be extremely good if you're going to want to stick with that one. But as the number of days left gets closer to 0, then the threshold drops, and a restaurant that's only medium good might be the one that you now want to stick with.
And why is this now a consideration? Why are people talking about this now?
Well, apparently people have sort of known that Feynman considered some restaurant problem for a long time, but they hadn't really been able to track it down. But recently, 3 researchers, an international team, found this napkin on which Feynman had scribbled and were able to study it, piece together the problem that Feynman had been thinking about, resolve it, and then go on to see what do real humans do when faced with the same problem.
Because this is actually a kind of broad form of problem, isn't it? They call it the optimal stopping problem because we encounter this in everyday life all the time. How long should I go prowling around the car park looking for the perfect parking place? How many people should I date before I decide to marry one of them? For example, that life is full of these sorts of things.
Exactly. Those are 2 very good examples. The secretary problem. I'm going to interview people for a job. And as I see each person, I have to decide, do I want to hire this person or not? And if I send them away, perhaps they're never going to come back. That problem has a beautiful answer. It says that what you should really do is you should interview about 37% of all the people. And don't choose any of those, but then choose the best one you see thereafter who's better than all those you've seen previously. Now, Feynman's problem is an easier problem because you can always go back to an earlier choice, and that made the problem a little bit easier. The researchers who wrote the recent paper were not pure mathematicians. They were what are called computational cognitive scientists. And they wanted to use Feynman's sort of little napkin restaurant problem as a baseline to answer a deeper problem about how do real human brains handle economic trade-offs. And so they recruited a panel of, I think, 2,520 people. They looked at people going on holiday, and they said, your holiday is either going to be 7 days, 14 days, or 28 days. And you're going to go to one of 4 possible cities where the distribution of restaurants are different. And they just looked to see what would people do when trying to solve a problem of homing in on the best restaurant and maximizing their enjoyment over the length of the holiday. Now, of course, human brains aren't equipped to compute that square root formula that I mentioned a moment ago. What they found is that humans instead used a linear function where the threshold, instead of dropping like a sort of that square root form, it instead drops linearly. So perhaps when you begin your 14-day holiday, the threshold that a restaurant has to meet in order to be the one you commit to is maybe 90%. But then as you go down to with only 2 days left in the holiday, then a restaurant that's as good as 60% is one that you would want to use for the last 2 days. So a linearly declining threshold. Now, the amazing thing is that using a linearly declining threshold is not optimal, but it gets to within 99% of the optimum.
What's amazing is that we do this at all. So why have we evolved to be so adept at these sorts of things?
Humans face stopping problems all the time. Now, primitive man wasn't going to Thai restaurants and choosing ginger chicken, but primitive man certainly had to meet deadlines of the sun going down, winter coming, and so all the time faced with these sort of stopping problems. And so it's not hard to believe that through evolutionary pressures, mankind has developed a brain that can do this sort of thing. Running a brain is an expensive business, and a brain can't do square root calculations, but it can certainly do linear calculations without too much cognitive effort. And so that's probably why we've developed these sorts of stopping rules. You see it, when you're young, your brain is an exploratory rocket ship. You try new music, you make diverse friends, you seek novelty, you're finding things that will pay dividends for the rest of your life. Now, when we get older, we naturally prune our circle of friends, We stick tightly to the things we love, the music we love, the books we enjoy. It's not getting boring. I guess it's just, the optimization of this linear function taking place over our own human lives.
Richard Webber, mathematician and fellow at Queen's College, Cambridge, with proof, if you needed it, of the concept of food for thought. Well, that's where we leave it for this week. Tune in on Tuesday, though, when we're going to be celebrating the origins of the summer solstice and exploring the intriguing mystery of one of the world's most famous ancient landmarks, that sundial that we call Stonehenge. If you'd like to get in touch in the meantime, it's chris@thenakedscientist.com, and we would, of course, greatly appreciate it if you enjoy these programmes if you drop us a donation to nakedscientist.com/donate to help keep the show on the road. From all of us here at The Naked Scientist, meanwhile, thank you for listening, thanks for your company, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.